It is not good to eat much honey, so to seek one's own glory is not glory. Whoever has no rule over his own spirit is like a city broken down without walls. One of the interesting things about life is that whatever you build, whatever edifices you build or institutions you build, if you don't build the character of people, build your own personal character, it can be all brought to naught. They say that when the ancient Chinese decided to live in peace, they made the Great Wall of China. The Great Wall of China is one of the marvels of the world. You can see it from space. It is so high, so big, it was virtually unscalable and impenetrable. But during the first 100 years of Chinese existence, they were invaded 3 times after they built the wall. And every time that they were invaded, it was not because enemies came in and breached the gates. It was because they were able to bribe the gods. So it is so important that whatever we build, that we remember that we have to build our own personal character and the character of our people, because otherwise our building will be in vain. Amen. Let's bow our heads. Father God, we just thank you for this opportunity once again. Lord, we thank you for all the members of this house who are here to represent the Bahamian people. And we pray, Father, today that the business that is conducted would be decent, in order, and for the benefit and the favorable outcome of the Bahamian people. And we thank you for these things. In Jesus' name. Our Father, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and glory, forever and ever.
Just a moment. Good morning, honorable members. Just before we read the roll, we have a guest with us this morning, the Reverend Chuck Garriott from Oklahoma City. He is a minister to state in Washington, D.C. And part of his function is to have communication with and to encourage the development of righteousness in government. I was fortunate yesterday to spend some time with Mr. Reverend Garriott, who made a courtesy call on the office of Speaker. And I invited him this morning to bring greetings to this honorable Parliament. I now call on Reverend Chuck Garriott.
Good morning. It is an honor for me to be here. Mr. Speaker, thank you for the invitation, and for those who are here, I realize that when you have a visitor come from other parts of the world, that there's always some questions like, what is this person's agenda? But I do appreciate and I'm honored to have an opportunity to address the Assembly. My background is as a pastor within Oklahoma City, where I was for 20 years. And while I was there, I became very familiar with the state government. And I believe that through that experience, God was calling me to people in government, not just in Oklahoma, but in the rest of the United States and the world. And so it's a privilege for me to be here. I would like to read to you from a passage in the Old Testament as a way of explaining a little bit more of how I think and the message that I bring to those in places like Washington, D.C., and our state capitals throughout the United States and in international capitals. It's from 1 Chronicles chapter 29. This is the address that David gives to the people of Israel in regards to the building of the temple. Just note for a moment what he says. Therefore David blessed the Lord in the presence of all the assembly. And David said, Blessed are you, O Lord, the God of Israel, our Father, forever and ever. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty. For all that is in the heavens and in the earth is yours. Yours is the kingdom, O Lord. You are exalted as head above all. Both riches and honor come from you, and you rule over all. That's my message. And when I'm in Washington and I spend time with House and Senate members, Democrats and Republicans, and those who are involved in the White House and different agencies, that is fundamentally the message. When I was in high school, I was reminded that I knew about God, but I did not know God. And it was at that point in my life that I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ. That transformed my thinking, and it transformed my direction. And it put me on a very different path. And I realized at the time that my life does not belong to me. It doesn't belong to Chuck Darius, but it belongs to God. And it's his because of the shed blood of Jesus Christ. And so I realized over time that every day as I wake up, I have to ask the question, what does God want from me today? And if I'm to accomplish his will, I must do it through the gospel, through Christ Jesus. That's my message to those in government. One of the things that we do in Washington, D.C. is we do publish different books, and I brought a complimentary copy this morning to give to Mr. Speaker, if I may, at some point. It's basically about how the gospel impacts our lives. And having worked in Washington, D.C. for the last 18 years, this particular book I wrote as a way of expressing and helping our people in Washington, D.C. to better understand how the gospel impacts their lives. So I'll leave it wherever it's appropriate. I just want you to know how honored I am to be here. Thank you. This morning, I appreciate getting to know you, and I hope that I'll have an opportunity maybe to meet some of you in the days to come. Thank you. I'm sorry. Almost got put in jail.
Thank you very, very much, Reverend Chuck Garriott. You may proceed.
So Hubert Minnis, Peter Turnquest, Brent Simonet, Desmond Bannister, Renwood Wells, Jeffrey Lloyd, Dr. Dwayne Sands, Marvin Dane, Frankie Campbell, Delicio Diagula, Michael Pintard, Aaron Henfield, Ramal Ferrero, Lanisha Rowles, Grenville Rowles, Ellsworth Johnson, Philip Davis, Vaughn Miller, Lakeisha Parker Edgecombe, Hiram Lewis, Carlton Bolag, James Albury, Travis Robinson, Adrian Gibson, Donald Saunders, Frederick McAlpine, Hank Onson, Mark Hume, Michael Pope, Miriam Repley Emmanuel, Reese Chipman, Reuben Ramming, Ricky Mackey, Shenandoah Cartwright, Chanel Ferguson, Leonard Hannah Martin, Icewell Forbes, Chester Cooper.
We want to thank our guests again morning Reverend Chuck Garriott for his kind words of enlightenment and encouragement to the Parliament of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Introduction and swearing in of new members. The laying of documents by ministers. Statements and communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for South Beach.
May it please the Honorable Speaker. Sir, I rise this morning to the graces and generosity and the authority of the people of South Beach. And in this particular circumstance, the minister with responsibility for education. Sir, approximately 2 p.m. yesterday, Tuesday, May 18th, I was notified by telephone of a stabbing incident at the government high school here in New Providence. Upon arrival at the school, I met Miss Eloise Wims, principal, the director, Dr. Marcellus, Director of Education, Dr. Marcellus Taylor, Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Lorraine Bristow, Undersecretary, Miss Sarita Clark, Mr. Brooks, who is Director of Security at the Ministry of Education, other ministry officials. Ms. Wims proceeded to inform us that during the lunch break period, 2 male students were in the courtyard having a discussion when they were approached by 2 other government high students, males. All 4 students were of the grade 11. When all of a sudden, one of the approaching students began stabbing the 2 other who were in discussion. As a consequence, young Ken Paul, age 16 years, was stabbed about the body and died at the scene. Other student, 16-year-old Timothy Johnson, was also stabbed about the body, transported to the Princess Margaret Hospital, where he is presently being treated. I last visited the government high school for a situation similar to this in January of 2017. And a teenage boy also found himself in critical condition after he was stabbed multiple times during a brawl at the school. At the time, 2 other students injured. That same year, June of 2017, shortly after assuming office as minister, student at the H.O. Nash Junior High School was also stabbed on the school's campus. He was treated and survived. It is, Mr. Speaker, sporadic. It is unusual, highly unusual, but it happens. Violent acts on school campuses. Too often, there is violence in the society in which our children are enmeshed. The ministry itself struggles with the concept that a 16-year-old male could fathom the option of stabbing another person with a weapon, resulting in their untimely and tragic demise. It is beyond the ordinary calculus of the Ministry of Education But, Mr. Speaker, here it is. I, in this ministry, this government, our people, extend to the parents, the family of young Ken Paul, a deceased now member of the grade 11 Government High community. To the Government High community, Ms. Wims, Mr. Patterson, Mr. Grant, and the administrative team, and all faculty and staff, our sincere prayers, heartfelt sympathies, condolences on their tragic loss. We are here for you. I spoke earlier this morning to the mother of young Timothy Johnson, the other student, the one who had and is now being treated in hospital. I reached out without success to Miss Michelle, the mother of Ken Paul, and she has been informed that we are attempting to visit her, and we shall do so immediately following this communication. I told Miss Gustave that our prayers, sympathies are with her and her family. She told me that yesterday was pretty scary and of deep concern, but her son is now doing much better this morning. Sir, Ministry of Education holds as its foremost priority safety, well-being, hopeful aspirations of our students, teachers, administrators, and staff, and the welcoming community. In 2020, we at the Ministry of Education published the strategic plan for the safe reopening of schools. In it, we stated thus, and I quote, "Schools are a critical component of communities and have tremendous impact on the health, well-being, growth, and development of students and families. School safety and a positive school climate are not achieved by singular acts, but rather by effective, comprehensive, and collaborative efforts requiring the dedication and commitment of all school staff and relevant community members. As such, every effort is made to ensure that there is a safe and secure environment for all of our students, staff, and visitors, and to ensure school districts are prepared to effectively respond to all emergencies that might affect the health, safety, and security of students and staff." Mr. Speaker, the ministry is horrifyingly grieved by this tragic accident and expresses its heartfelt condolences to all affected and concerned. I visited the campus this morning along with the Honorable Member for Mount Moriah, Marvin Dames, Minister of National Security, and with the principal, Miss Eloise Wims, spoke to the staff, the grade 12 students who are attending school today, and the student and the administrative, teachers and administrators. I was joined by a number of our Ministry of Education counselors who are on site, offering whatever assistance, whatever psychotherapeutic support may be needed. During his address to the assembled audience this morning, Mr. Dames related a tragically unbelievable statement that the two young persons, certainly the young man who inflicted the deadly wounds, are yet not in police custody, which means that they are potentially being harbored by someone. Please be aware, Mr. Speaker, honorable members, that this ministry is committed to a policy of no tolerance for violence on our school campuses. We are, however, conscious of the fact that students and or others within our school community may fall prey at times to the incidences of violence and other forms of disruptive behavior which also plague the wider society. We commend the efforts of our school administrators and security officers and police officers for their commitment to the enforcement of measures designed to mitigate against occurrences such, who work very hard every day to keep our campuses safe. Community must be assured that the Ministry of Education and this government will spare no effort in its ongoing quest to eliminate acts of violence against students, staff, and others visiting our campus. We are assured that the police is now wrapping up its investigations into this matter and that the perpetrators of this attack will be brought to justice. Sir, this act occurred during one of the most disruptive periods in the history of education in the Bahamas. The pandemic, and preceded by the monster Dorian, has had an unequal challenged imposition on the delivery of education in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. We are not alone. The United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, commonly known as UNESCO, of which the Bahamas is a member, wrote just recently, quote, "COVID-19 pandemic has caused abrupt and profound changes around the world. The worst shock to education systems in decades, the longest closures of schools combined with a looming recession. It sets back the progress made on the global development goals, particularly those focused on education. All of this will lead to a crisis in human development that continues long after disease transmission has ended." The Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, has not been spared. Our students have suffered as well. To now, for the community at Government High, students-wise, to yet be further affected by a traumatic event of Tuesday, May the 18th, has posed even additional destabilizing effects. However, despite the challenges, our children and teachers, educators, have proven their unequaled resilience in maintaining an acceptable degree of academic performance. Government High, an example of such. To note, last year, our students increased their performances in 15 of the 27 BGCSE subjects in our national exams and improved in 6 of the BJC subjects, all in a pandemic. The national exams in our public schools, private schools have already started. Students at GHS and across the country are sitting their exams or attending classes, which classes face-to-face will cease this weekend to resume on June the 3rd. In response to the concerns of the spread of COVID viruses on campus. Mr. Speaker, Ministry of Education rests on the assurance that education is everyone's business. Violence, among others, is a social virus contaminating the hearts and minds of too many of our people, especially the young. Too often, these young, particularly males, feel neglected, ignored, discounted, or disrespected, and too often by persons in their lives, family and friends, from whom they should receive and expect to receive the highest degree of affection and affirmation. As a result, they are angry. They lash out at others in frustration that their psychosocial, emotional needs are not being met. While the physical diet is necessary, of course, but so is the emotional, psychological, and the social. Consequently, too often, Mr. Speaker, teachers and administrators, especially in our public school system, are ensnared with issues around discipline and behavior, which sadly interrupts or retards the proper learning environment all students need to succeed. For the Ministry of Education, it is safety first and safety always. Violence is not taught or tolerated on our school campuses. Whenever it happens, it is brought there by those from the community. Therefore, ministry calls upon all to join in the satisfaction of our children's education, recognizing that it doesn't reside within the exclusive portfolio of any single one of us. The ministry thanks all stakeholders who continue to work in unison for the benefit of our students, the development of our nation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order, would like the communication be brought up. Order that the communication to lie on the table. Honorable members, you would note when you came in this morning, there was a publication at your seat. That publication was a book by the Reverend Dr. Bishop Simeon B. Hall. It is entitled, "A Few Reasons You Don't Look Like the Hell You've Been Through." This book was made available to honorable members by the honorable member for West, Grand Bahama, and Bimini. I think we should give her. We want to thank the honorable member for this contribution to the lives of our colleagues. And honorable members, while I'm at it, the book that was presented to me early this morning by Reverend Charles Garriott is entitled Love and Power. And I read one of the testimonials that impressed upon me that I should also seek to make this book available to all members. It reads, Garriott exploitedly jabs at the inflated ego as Washington, while underscoring the necessity for servant-oriented leadership in places where humility and conviction can be counter-cultural. I thought that was very interesting, and I believe that this book can be impactful as we move the Bahamas towards good governance. Honorable members, I shall undertake to communicate with Reverend Garriott with respect to making this book available to all members. And while I'm at it, I don't know how long we intend to go today, but today is my 42nd anniversary. Thank you so much, honorable members. Further statements and communications by ministers. Communication by the clerk. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writs. Presentation of petitions. Presentation of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. Second reading and committal of bills. Committee of the whole House. Third reading and passing of bills.
None, Mr. Speaker.
Consideration of Senate amendments. Resolutions. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today as Minister of Health in this honorable House, giving praise to Yahweh Elohim, the Lord of life. For in him we live, move, and have our being. Mr. Speaker, I thank the wonderful and gracious people of Bamboo Town who have sent me to this place. And while I continuously value their voice, I am really here to consistently give voice to their values. Mr. Speaker, my work here today in this House on behalf of the good Lord, the people of Bamboo Town, and by extension, the people of this great nation, this government, is to move this resolution to extend the emergency order and the powers therein. Mr. Speaker, governments all around the world have been battling the unrelentless SARS-CoV-2 virus, which emerged in late December 2019 and was declared a global pandemic on the 11th of March 2020 last year. Protecting the lives and livelihoods of its people has presented challenges to governments all along the way. But thanks be to Yahweh, none of them have been insurmountable for this government here in the Bahamas.
Mr. Speaker, fast forward 14 months. The world is still battling this persistent virus. Globally, there has been to date more than 163 million cases of COVID. And unfortunately, the world has seen over 3 million deaths due to COVID-19. Countries around the globe have emerged as epicenters of the pandemic at differing periods. The United States, Mr. Speaker, now accounts for more than 20% of global cases, and India, 15%. Even though there has been some 1.5 billion vaccines administered globally, I want to say that again, Mr. Speaker, so that folks can know and understand what has been done. Even though there has been some 1.5 billion vaccine doses administered globally, vaccine hesitancy remains a challenge. Mr. Speaker, it has been a very long road, but as a people, we must remain persistent. Roy Bennett, the author of Light in the Heart, advises that your hardest times often lead to the greatest moments of your life. But keep going. Tough situations build strong people in the end, unquote. Mr. Speaker, this government aims to strictly apply these words. We will keep going. We will never give up. And as Churchill said, we will win. We know we will reap better times, and our people will be stronger for it. Mr. Speaker, it is without doubt that we are currently facing the third wave of COVID-19 in the Bahamas. The National COVID-19 report bears proof of this fact. We continue to record new COVID-19 cases in the country. On Tuesday, the 17th of May, 2021, there were 53 newly confirmed cases of COVID-19. This brings the total number of confirmed cases in the Bahamas to 11,278. Of this total, 3,729, or 33.1% of that case and cases are attributable to our country's third wave. Currently, Mr. Speaker, there are 48 COVID-19 patients in hospital. 5 in Grand Bahama, 4 moderately ill, and 1 patient currently in intensive care in Grand Bahama. In New Providence, there are 43 hospitalized COVID-19 patients. 9 at Doctors Hospital, 4 are moderately ill, and 5 are currently in intensive care. 9 moderately ill COVID-19 patients are being treated at the South Beach Acute Care and Referral Center. Mr. Speaker, at the Princess Margaret Hospital, there are 25 moderately ill patients with COVID-19. In all, there are some 859 active cases of COVID-19 in country. 41 persons have been recently classified as recovered from COVID-19. This brings the total number of recoveries to 10,121 for a recovery rate of 89.74%. Mr. Speaker, we are down from our recovery rate of 92.6% when I last addressed this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, the total number of COVID-19 deaths now stands at 221. One COVID-19 death to us in the Ministry of Health is still one too many. We continue to pray for the families in the Bahamas who have lost the loved ones to this persistent plague, this unrelenting COVID-19 menace. Mr. Speaker, our response. There are a total of 100 COVID-19 beds for the country. All COVID-19 care facilities, except those located on Grand Bahama, are experiencing a sustained and increased demand for COVID-19 beds. Last week, the average COVID-19 bed capacity rate reached a high of almost 70%. This figure is 10 percentage points higher than the previous week. Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 bed capacity is further challenged by the issue of COVID-19 borders. These are persons, Mr. Speaker, who remain in hospital when they no longer require hospital care for COVID-19. Most are persons who are no longer received by the long-term care homes from which they came, and others are well enough for whom isolation, but social and environmental circumstances at their place of residence is not conducive for safe isolation. There are 3 COVID-19 borders at South Beach Health Center, 10 at Princess Margaret Hospital, and 2 in Grand Bahama Health Services. Mr. Speaker, this accrues a total of 15 acute care COVID-19 beds being occupied and unavailable for those who require hospital-level care. The Ministry of Health, along with the Ministry of Social Services, will be working to bring a speedy resolution where possible in these circumstances. Mr. Speaker, while bed capacity is one side of the coin, taking care of patients requires much more than a bed. The PMH has had to close medical surgical wards, not because of infrastructural inadequacies or due to COVID-19 exposures, but solely to draw on a limited staff pool to redirect them to the care of COVID-19 patients. In short, Mr. Speaker, based on manpower challenges, we are over capacity to care for patients at Princess Margaret Hospital. This equates to a healthcare system, Mr. Speaker, that is severely challenged and stretched currently at its seams. Mr. Speaker, with the closure of wards at PMH, which are required for care of ongoing chronic and acute illnesses, the collateral damage of increasing COVID-19 patients in an already stressed healthcare environment is now being realized. This state of affairs is having a domino effect on the delivery of other essential care. For example, Mr. Speaker, managing uncontrolled diabetes require admissions, or persons requiring elective surgeries may have to be postponed in the immediate interim. Delayed and deferred care due to health human resource shortages, in particular a nursing deficit, is not serving the country well. The Doctors Hospital COVID-19 facility for managing severely ill COVID-19 patients is also restricted by nursing shortages. challenged with coverage for all available COVID-19 beds. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Health has not been silent on addressing and seeking to address this issue. The ministry has moved to redeployment of nursing staff from other areas, including the closures of units. We've moved to the use of our overtime facility to engage additional staff. We are fast-tracking financial clearance for 34 graduate nurses already in the public sector. And we've identified the identification of 3 nurses to transition through the public service process for formal engagement and continuing the interviewing process for potential nursing applicants at PMH. And Mr. Speaker, in addition, recommendations for the re-engagement of available retired nurses who possess a wealth of valuable knowledge and experience. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Health and the Public Hospital Authority continues to explore all options for international recruitment of nurses. Globally, however, there is a huge nursing gap of some 6 million needed nurses. I want to say that again, Mr. Speaker, so that folks would understand. Globally, however, there is a huge nursing gap of some 6 million needed nurses for healthcare systems throughout the globe. This reality challenges our local efforts here at home in recruiting. Notably, this global nursing and midwifery shortage is on the agenda of the 74th World Health Assembly, which will convene next week. And, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas is the outgoing president of the World Health Assembly. And we will be most certainly pushing this issue along with our other sister Caribbean countries in the region to ensure that this issue is addressed. Mr. Speaker, we have already articulated to this honorable House the new COVID-19 cases are increasing, hospitalizations are increasing, and health worker fatigue is increasing. In addition to those, the ministry reports that the positivity rate is also increasing. From the beginning of April, our positivity rate has reflected a steady increase and now stands at 15%. To put this in perspective, the international recommendation is that the positivity rate not exceed 5%, which speaks to management and containment of this COVID menace. Mr. Speaker, as previously stated, COVID-19 deaths now stands at 221. Deaths due to COVID-19 remains a reality in the Bahamas and globally. Of note, Mr. Speaker, of the total deaths, 53 or 24% occurred since the onset of the third wave alone. And this does not account for the 26 deaths that currently remain under investigation and review. Mr. Speaker, the age distribution of COVID-19 cases provides adequate insight into the epidemiological profile, and we are troubled by the trend that is evolving. During the first wave, 40 years and older attributed to the greatest share of the national COVID-19 burden. In the second wave, the shift to those who were 49 years or younger was observed. At this point in the third wave, Mr. Speaker, I want the Bahamian people to hear and understand. At this point in the third wave, Mr. Speaker, we are seeing COVID-19 infections in the very young and adolescent population, and they are being hospitalized. Notably, during the entire first and second waves, COVID-19 cases among those 0 to 9 years represented only 1% of the total cumulative cases for each respective wave. Already at this point in the third wave, those ages 0 to 9 years account for 106, or 3% of the third wave COVID-19 cases. Mr. Speaker, we cannot dismiss the likelihood that this phenomena is a result of variants. Stay tuned, Pine Ridge. Screening of COVID-19 positive samples for mutations, which characterize variants of concern at the National Reference Lab, indicated the possibility of variants in country. While we await confirmation, the changing epi profile is in keeping with the presence of variants, and we are taking action. Mr. Speaker, recognizing the phenomena of increasing cases among young and adolescents, I want all and sundry to hear this, Mr. Speaker. I want all and sundry to hear this. Mr. Speaker, recognizing the phenomena of increasing cases among young and adolescents, the government has moved with urgency to secure doses of the Pfizer vaccine, which is the only emergency use listing approved vaccine for administration to the under 18 age group. Mr. Speaker, with this statistics in mind, it is clear that the Bahamas and our health system specifically is still in a state of public emergency. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is imperative that we responsibly extend the emergency powers orders. Mr. Speaker, extending the emergency powers orders is not new to us. This is familiar environment. We got through the first and second waves successfully with the help of healthcare workers and the general public, and we will do it again in this third wave. How do we know it, Mr. Speaker? We know it because a quick study of Grand Bahamas' success helps us to appreciate that we can get through this third wave quickly, if we are continually responsive. Mr. Speaker, islands that have gone months without recording a COVID-19 case, such as Cat Island and Berry Islands, on Monday alone, Cat Island reported 16 new cases. However, consistently accounting for approximately 80% that are having a modest decline. Indicators such as that in general we expect an up, the need for caution. The healthcare system answering well as the observed as well as observed non-adherent to mask wearing distancing social things are still state emergency. And performing well across these islands on deck. The approach of collaborative participation with multi-stakeholders and residents reaping benefits. Highlighting the Bahama experience itself is no pretty. The other side, say it again. The Bahama experience is no that the island went, when Bahama went from of 3 new cases a week on a weekly basis, in the third week, to low-digit cases. How was it done? Contributing to the decline were reinvigoration, communication channels established across critical government agencies, health as a focal point. Steps taken to ensure effective work and minors to participate in information sharing, address COVID-19 issues, for policy Royal on the island. Mr. Speaker, it is most impressive. That ain't what they tell you, but I telling you. Mr. Speaker, it is most impressive, and if you want to know the elixir, it was most impressive that when Grand Bahamians were offered access to COVID-19 vaccines, they responded with much enthusiasm and have made significant strides in vaccinating eligible populations, in particular older persons. This has no doubt, Mr. Speaker, this has no doubt contributed to the observed decline in COVID-19 positives and hospitalizations in Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, we learn from the experience of others. Our closest neighbors to the north, the United States, was able to vaccinate 37.6% of its population in a very short period of time. As a matter of fact, 70% of the United States has received at least the first shot of a vaccine, with 40% having received the second shot, approximately. As a result, COVID-19 policies have been revised and relaxed for fully vaccinated U.S. residents. Some relaxation for this groups include they may stop wearing masks or maintaining social distancing in most indoor and outdoor settings, regardless of size. They may start doing the things that they had stopped doing because of the pandemic, such as connecting and getting together with families in close settings. We too in the Bahamas can get there. It requires more of us rolling up our sleeves to receive the vaccine, or in the local vernacular, receiving the jab. Our PR campaign says, I got mine, you get yours. Get vaccinated. Mr. Speaker, currently in the Bahamas, over 40,000 persons have taken vaccines thus far. In a country with approximately a population of 389,482, this represents about 10% of Bahamians and residents haven't taken the vaccine. Vaccine hesitancy, no doubt, is contributing to these numbers in the country. Of the priority groups identified during the planning phase of the vaccine rollout, in the groups that we desired to vaccinate, uniform branches, Mr. Speaker, the uniform branch service have had 1,199 of its 7,770 persons, 15.4% of its officers vaccinated. I want to say that again. We have the elixir for what ails us. The uniform branch service have had 1,199 persons vaccinated of its 7,770 individuals, a 15.4%. Among those 60 years and older, 6,339 of the 28,630, or 22.1% of those 60 and older, have been vaccinated. There's a little good news there. I thought it was worse than it was, but it's a little good news. Among all healthcare workers, clinical and non-clinical, some 2,626 persons of some 5,771, or 45.5%, have been vaccinated. I believe that number was a lot lower. I'm happy to see where it is. But Mr. Speaker, though these numbers are encouraging, the influential role of healthcare workers, as leaders in this fight is undisputable. While 45% are already vaccinated, we underscore that health worker safety is a priority for patient safety. For those not yet vaccinated, we implore you to take advantage of vaccination opportunities at your nearest vaccination site. Mr. Speaker, whenever I move into this territory, oftentimes it becomes controversial.
Not today.
But I go in there anyway.
Not today.
Mr. Speaker, believe it or not, taking the vaccine, in my view, is a moral thing to do. At Mark 12 and 30 and 31, we are encouraged that the two greatest laws is to love God and to love our neighbor. If we love God and appreciate life, we will do all that we can to stay alive and to stay well. Getting the vaccine will increase the likelihood of this outcome. Further, when we take the vaccine, we not only protect ourselves, but we are protecting our family and other persons around us. We are, in fact, Mr. Speaker, loving our neighbors as we love ourselves. Yes, Mr. Speaker, getting vaccinated shows love of God and love of neighbor.
Right thing to do.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, just a moment. Are you rising on a point of order? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Pine Ridge on a point of order.
Either it's misleading or I'm misinterpreting. Is the good member for Bamboo Town suggesting that if one does not take the vaccine, they do not love God? Is that what the good member is saying or suggesting to the populace in the Bahamas today? Just make it clear for us, please. That's his statement. That is his statement.
You gotta be kidding.
Mr. Speaker.
All right, go on.
Mr. Speaker. This is my contribution, my view, and I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, that when one takes responsibility for oneself and one neighbor, it is an expression of loving God as well as loving one's neighbor. He may have a different opinion,
You ain't taking it.
and I believe, as I said, I started off by speaking about the Lord of life, of which he is. Okay? Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker?
You take it?
It is a fact
Have you taken it?
that when we get vaccinated,
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, it is a fact that when we get vaccinated, we reduce the likelihood of having to be admitted to hospital.
Honorable members.
If we contract,
Honorable members. The member for Bamboo Town has the floor. You can rise on a point of order, but you can't speak across. Honorable members, you cannot just speak across the floor and interrupt the member.
you need to look deeper into Seychelles. Look at the numbers.
The chair recognizes the
Mr.
honorable member for Bamboo
Speaker,
Town.
it is in fact that when we get vaccinated, we reduce the likelihood of having to be admitted to hospital if we contract COVID-19. And we decrease the chances of death from COVID-19. Okay? I'm going to say it again.
Say that again, Say that again. Say that again.
Mr. Speaker, it is a fact that when we get vaccinated, we reduce the likelihood of having to be admitted to hospital if we contract COVID-19, and we decrease the chances of death from COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, the evidence continues to accrue in favor of vaccines. The evidence continues to accrue in favor of vaccines as an effective and useful tool in bringing this pandemic under control. This, as stated, and I want the member for Pine Ridge and all to hear, this, as stated in a Forbes article on May 18, referencing a new UK study which found that more than 95% of Brits vaccinated with just one shot of Pfizer or AstraZeneca vaccine developed COVID-19 antibodies. I want to say it again. The first shot. 95% of those who received the first shot of Pfizer or AstraZeneca developed antibodies. A figure that raises to almost 100% after the second dose. Mr. Speaker, for For a moment, but we've never demanded. We've always said it is a matter of conscience. And we've allowed the Bahamian people to make that decision. For a moment, let's paint a scenario.
It's your duty to educate too.
For a moment, Mr. Speaker, let's paint a, suppose cases continue to escalate to triple digits. Hospitalizations continue to grow, and Bahamians and residents remain hesitant to taking the vaccine. This would then place the government in a position to continue to do the right and moral thing for the masses. Mr. Speaker, the government can act in two ways. We can restrict the freedom of the general public and impose another lockdown to bring down the cases, contain the hospitalizations, and avoid deaths. Or we can open up and remain open despite the increasing cases, increased hospitalizations, and increasing deaths. Things can become so bad, like that of India, where persons do not wish to go outside for fear they will catch COVID-19 in a heartbeat. Mr. Speaker, the second scenario would allow us to arrive at herd immunity, but at a high cost to humanity. But we can achieve, Mr. Speaker, herd immunity safely through vaccination. I ask Bahamians, because I know, I ask Bahamians to question which scenario they prefer.
You didn't take yours anyway.
We have enough for you, go take yours.
You didn't take yours anyway. So that argument
Lead by example.
That's a non sequitur.
Fully
You didn't take yours
vaccinated.
anyway.
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable members.
Fully vaccinated.
Fully.
Mr. Speaker,
Fully.
Mr. Speaker, having free will, which the good Lord has given all of us, having free will and freedom to choose brings responsibility. Mr. Speaker, if we fail to choose responsibly, we may lose an awful lot of what this nation has achieved over the last 50 years. I encourage all Bahamians and residents to take the vaccine. I am convinced, Mr. Speaker, Bahamians and residents are tired of wearing masks in stores, at work, around family members and friends.
You have to wear masks on people who won't take it.
They are wary
Wear masks.
of disinfecting grocery trolleys, baskets, and purchase items brought into the home.
You're unsafe.
They now find using hand sanitizers when you enter and exit stores and maintaining 6 feet from others as a heavy burden to bear. They want to meet in person again and talk to people normally without thinking if they have COVID-19. How do we get to a place of normalcy, Mr. Speaker? We need to take the vaccine. I've got mine. Pine Ridge, you should get yours. You should get vaccinated.
It's available to you.
Mr. Speaker,
It's available
our American neighbors, Mr. Speaker, our American neighbors
Join your constituents.
are beginning to see the light. I want to say this, Mr. Speaker, and I want all and sundry to hear it, just in case. Repetition is good. Mr. Speaker, our American neighbors are beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel and the end of the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States. We can experience the same, the CDC said they didn't have to. We can experience the same here in the Bahamas. We just need to press forward, be courageous, take the vaccine to permit our nation to see the end of this dark tunnel and eventually the end of this awful pandemic. Mr. Speaker, we have been steadily fostering vaccinations in the country. For example, indoor dining is now permitted to patrons on islands previously prohibited from offering indoor dining at restaurants. This new loosening of restrictions applies to New Providence and Abaco. Mr. Speaker, patrons who have provided proof of vaccination are required, even though they're still required to adhere to COVID-19 protocols. Effective the 1st of May 2021, those traveling to the Bahamas who have been fully vaccinated and past the 2-week immunity period are exempt from all COVID-19 testing for entry into the Bahamas. This includes returning residents. COVID-19 protocols must continue to be followed. Effective April 21st, 2021, Bahamian citizens and residents who are fully vaccinated after receiving their second dose are exempted COVID-19 testing requirements when traveling inter-island from New Providence, Grand Bahama, Abaco, Exuma, and Eleuthera. And by the way, Pine Ridge, you do have to show payment of taxes in certain instances to be able to participate in certain aspects of this economy continuously, eh? Mr. Speaker, we are moving forward towards normalcy, and that's within any society, Pine Ridge. Mr. Speaker, we are moving forward towards normalcy. Mr. Speaker, vaccination sites have been set up at several locations. The schedule for the week of the 17th of May, Friday the 21st of May 2021 is as follows. Kendall G. L. Isaac Gymnasium will accept walk-up and online appointments between the hours of 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. The Church of God of Prophecy will accommodate walk-up and online appointments between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. St. Anselm's Church Hall, Bernard Road, will accept persons for walk-up and online appointments between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Bahama Cable Beach will accept interested persons for vaccinations by online appointment only between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. And Loyola Hall, Gladstone Road, will accept interested persons for vaccination by online appointment only from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. For those Bahamians and residents who wish to take the COVID-19 vaccine, please make an appointment, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say this again, Mr. Speaker, please make an appointment at vax.gov.bs. That's vax.gov.bs. Mr. Speaker, Bahamians and residents must take heart, get facts, remain informed, discuss the matter with health officials or healthcare providers and family members. Be courageous and take the vaccine to protect ourselves and our families. Mr. Speaker, Maya Angelou advised that courage is the most important of all virtues, because without courage you can't practice any other consistent virtue. We must all build up the desire to take the vaccine for the Bahamas to reach herd immunity. While the government maintains taking the vaccine, Mr. Speaker, is a personal choice. Achieving herd immunity means that we will all be able to take off our masks and share our beautiful smiles with a glowing, naked face that shows emotion and attachment that means so much to each of us. Until that gracious day, Mr. Speaker, we must remember to wear our masks, remain physically distant, and wash and sanitize our hands. Mr. Speaker, Roy Bennett says, never lose hope. Storms make people stronger and never last forever. Yes, Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 conditions will not last forever in this country. In the meantime, we must remain strong as a people. We must seek to get vaccinated and get past this third wave to usher in a new dawn of normalcy. This is my fervent hope. Mr. Speaker, with the third wave still in effect, we've never demanded Pine Ridge, you know that. We've never demanded. Mr. Speaker, with the third wave still in effect, coupled with vaccine deployment now progressing, I hereby support the extension of the emergency powers resolution and the order there. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless this great Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Honorable member, do you have
I think I
a...
will read the resolution.
Yes.
Just the first paragraph.
First and last.
Whereas pursuant to Article 29(1) of the Constitution, the Governor General may make a proclamation of emergency declaring that a state of public emergency for the purposes of that article exists in the Bahamas. And whereas it continues to be necessary and expedient for securing the public safety and defense of the Bahamas, the maintenance of public order, the suppression of mutiny, rebellion, and riot, and for maintaining supplies and services essential to life and well-being of the community to continue in force, the proclamation, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Management and Recovery Regulations 2021, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Management and Recovery Order 2021, and the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Management Recovery Special Provisions Order 2021. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this House, A, approves the continuance of the proclamation of emergency made on the 14th day of May 2021 until the 13th day of August 2021. B, affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Management and Recovery Regulations 2021 made on the 14th day of May 2021 until the 13th day of August 2021. C, affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Management and Recovery Order 2021 made on the 16th day of May 2021 until the 13th day of August 2021. And D, affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Management and Recovery Special Provisions Order 2021 made on the 16th day of May 2021 until the 13th day of August 2021. Mr. Speaker, I so move.
Thank you, honorable member. Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I rise to second the resolution moved by the member for Bamboo Town, the member for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, as I listened to Pastor Burrs this morning, and he spoke about TGH, the only thing ran across my mind was THC, the content of marijuana. I haven't spent all night reading the marijuana bill and hoping to bring it here next week, if not very soon after it. But Mr. Speaker, it has been 17 months since the outbreak of the novel coronavirus. It spread around the world with deadly and remarkable speed, causing the worst pandemic in this century. Though the official global death toll is near 3.5 million, researchers fear the death rate count is much higher. In The Economist this week, the magazine released its model for projected deaths thus far, analyzing various data. It suggests there have been somewhere between 7.1 million and 12.7 million deaths thus far. And the magnitude of the suffering in country after country is immense. We are all tired of this period of heartbreak and suffering, Mr. Speaker. Yet the pandemic is not over. It rages on in various regions. South America and Southeast Asia are having particularly bad times with high cases, counts, and deaths being recorded. The large number of cases have led to shortages of bed and oxygen. And this virus, Mr. Speaker, has the capacity to cause the collapse of hospital systems. This leads to more deaths because basic treatment cannot be administered to those in need. And parts of our Caribbean, too, are experiencing surges with some of our neighbors in very difficult circumstances. And this has led to greater and increased restrictions in some places, indeed much greater than the restrictions we see here in the Bahamas. But here in the Bahamas, we remain in a wave. Cases of hospitalizations are elevated, though we all would like to return to our pre-pandemic norms. The emergency continues here and abroad. Mr. Speaker, we are here today to extend the emergency measures because the pandemic continues. These measures allow on constant guard and ready if matters worsen. These measures have saved lives and have been recommended by health experts here at home. And similar measures are being utilized throughout the world, recommended by scientists and medical experts. Only the most reckless and heartless people would recommend the removal of measures that save lives. Only the most reckless and heartless would ignore the medical advice and instead play petty politics with people's lives. It is difficult to take seriously those who appear not to understand the necessity for certain emergency orders. And my government, Mr. Speaker, has been measured with these legal powers. We have continued to ask Parliament for authorization as allowed in our Constitution and in our laws. We have only utilized necessary rules to keep Bahamians and residents safe. We are here to save lives, not to play games, nor to pander. We use an approach that takes into consideration the conditions on our various islands. For example, measures needed on New Providence, where higher cases are being reported, would not be needed on small islands such as Crooked Island, where no severe problems exist. While we think it is necessary to extend emergency measures, let me foreshadow what our future will look like living with COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, the coronavirus that causes COVID-19 is not going away. It is highly infectious. It continues to mutate. Vaccinations are key to getting us out of the pandemic. And thus far, approximately 40,000 Bahamians have received a first dose of vaccine. We have also begun the process of issuing second doses. And I, Mr. Speaker, have received my vaccine and I'm proud to present my card here that I can show as I travel throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I again encourage all eligible Bahamians and residents to get vaccinated. Vaccinations work in dramatically reducing the risk of severe diseases and death. Countries such as Israel and the United Kingdom have demonstrated the effectiveness of mass vaccinations. Both countries are world leaders in COVID-19 vaccinations. Consequently, Mr. Speaker, Their case numbers, hospitalizations, and deaths have fallen dramatically. Both countries are moving to broader reopening of their economies and societies. And we need a large number of Bahamians to take the vaccine in order to help end the emergency phase of the pandemic in our country. Mr. Speaker, when the health minister had spoken about earlier, in the health professionals, health workers account about 45.5% of health workers were vaccinated, and the uniform branches, only 15.4% of those branches were vaccinated. I would encourage, very proud of the health workers, but I would encourage the additional 50-odd% to likewise become vaccinated, and I also encourage the uniform branches to become vaccinated. Mr. Speaker, this is extremely important because members of the uniform branches and Family Island administrators, etc., move about through various different areas throughout the country and different community quite readily. And if such individuals, by chance, became infected, then those individuals can become super spreaders as they perform their jobs. Therefore, I would encourage Family Island administrators, those in that capacity, and the uniform branches to obtain their vaccine so as to minimize this possibility and ensure that it does not happen. The Bahamas has a service-based economy, Mr. Speaker, and our number one industry is tourism. And for our economy to work, we need openness, not restrictions. As we increasingly open up, those who are not vaccinated will be at more risk of contracting the virus. And over time, we will have to increasingly open up in a reasonable and responsible manner. We have to ensure Bahamians are able to make a living, and our government has provided historic amounts of food and unemployment assistance during this crisis. We have done so, Mr. Speaker, because we care about our people. However, there are financial limitations to the capacity of small developing states. We are not like the United Kingdom, who was able to borrow $303 billion, $303 billion to assist its citizens. Nor are we like the United States, who was able to print $6 trillion to assist its citizens. We can only do what our economy can afford, and be assured we will max it out to ensure that the lives of Bahamians are saved. Our economy needs a certain amount of openness so that the citizens, residents, and the government have the resources to live up to their responsibilities. The vaccines onshore, Mr. Speaker, and more coming, we are at the stage when individual choices will carry great consequences. Heinrich, being vaccinated with an effective vaccine protects the individual against this deadly virus. Not being vaccinated means that an individual is still at risk. The Cayman Campus magazine reported yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and I quote, "Data from Bermuda, England, and the US shows very clearly that vaccines work." Research by Public Health England published this week found that people who had a single dose of AstraZeneca had around 80% lower risk of death than those who were not immunized, end quote. And Mr. Speaker, when the time is appropriate, guided by our public health experts, we will move to a new regime outside of the current emergency measures. That time is closer than many may realize. Common sense public health rules will remain. However, this regime will be in time be phased out. Mr. Speaker, my government follows the science. We make policies with our public health advisors. Our public health experts have briefings in which they share the science with the entire country. They also release the COVID-19 case data for the whole country and world to see. It baffles many, Mr. Speaker, when they hear the leader of the opposition repeat his empty talking point of, and I quote, "Where's the science?" End quote. Maybe he just does not understand basic science. Perhaps he does not understand the briefings or the reports. The leader of the opposition is a master of empty rhetoric. His strategy during this pandemic has been attack by attacking sake because he has little of substance to offer. I differ strongly with the posture of leader of opposition, Mr. Speaker, as both Prime Minister and as a medical doctor. This has been the worst crisis in our modern history, and leaders should be able to come together for the common good. Yet he has chosen narrow politics over the protection of the people.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador on a point of order.
The member opposite, Kalani, right, is clearly, in his own word, in his Alice in Wonderland. That's where he is. Because, Mr. Speaker, right, at every step, initially, I reached out to him. He never reached out to me, I reached out to him from the start. Right? It's him who told, he who told the public and the media, I don't listen to Brave. So I speak in the public with recommendations, having regard to what I understand the medical advice worldwide and what is happening in other countries. I could read and understand, and from that I have been making my recommendations. No one can say in here, with any degree of honesty, that I have not been making recommendations as to how to deal with this virus. Right? And it is disingenuous for the member of Kalani, I guess, what should I expect anyhow?
Oh, you finished? Speaker. Mr. Speaker, recommendations are best given when one listens to the scientific evidence and the situation in the Bahamas. And in every meeting that the member was invited to, he never showed up. In fact, he sent the deputy to represent him.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador on a point of order.
Again, the member is being disingenuous.
No, man,
the meetings that was properly noticed for me to attend, I attended it. I attended the meetings. In fact, we met initially with his appointed task force, right? With the then Minister of Health, Dwayne Sands. See, I don't want to get into their issues, because we know what their issues are. I know what the issues were. I met with the task force.
Your task force?
No, your task force. That was headed then by Dr. Dwayne Sands, the member for Elizabeth. The next thing I know, you had your own task force.
That's not so. That's not so.
Listen, let's talk to the. Listen, you had your own task force, right? And so you had competing task force,
That's not so.
right? right? So I'm not playing no politics.
You took your vaccine?
So, Mr. Speaker, and at a meeting that I was unable to attend when they invited me, I was represented by the deputy.
You say you ain't coming to no meeting.
Honorable members,
You ain't coming to no meeting.
I was represented at the meeting
Right in here, you say
by
you ain't
my
coming to no
deputy.
meeting.
Once represented, they felt that the meeting,
You say you ain't coming to
I'm not going to say what they thought of the meeting, but they went to the meeting.
Yes or no?
They didn't find it was as constructive as it ought to be. And the next meeting they invited me to was when he stood up here at 5 o'clock during the day and told people he invited me to the meeting, but then it was not so.
You took your vaccine?
It was not so.
thank you, honorable member.
Well, it's good you could triple the devil. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the government has one task force, not two task force, one for the ministry and one for me. The government has one task force, and the Ministry of Health would have been invited on several occasions to do.
Honorable members, honorable members, the member for Kalani has the floor.
The Ministry of Health would have been invited to Cabinet Office on numerous occasions to perform presentations, at which time the opposition was likewise invited. And on all occasions, the opposition leader would have sent a team, and he himself would not have come. And in fact, the deputy leader would have been on several occasions representing the opposition, and the deputy leader would have asked very, very good questions, which were answered.
Yeah, you can speak. I heard
Mr.
you.
Speaker,
You spoke with Dr. Dalry.
the leader of the opposition has flip-flopped so much during this pandemic that we sometimes don't know what his latest views are. He is like a weather vane, often blowing back and forth depending on the direction of the wind. He has been for the emergency orders before. He was against them. He criticized the vaccine rollout, and he can refer to the Nassau Guardian article by Rachel Scott on May 4th if he so choose. Yet he was there as soon as possible at the well-organized vaccine site to get vaccinated. Not only that, Mr. Speaker, the member communication would have been sent to the member's staff and to inform him that it was not that he should not report to the vaccine site because they were not ready for him. But in spite of that, he was there on time.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador. On a point of order, honorable member.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. You know, we are here dealing with a very serious crisis. Bahamians are dying. My island, Cat Island, which I can speak to, is in the state it is because of the negligence, either the negligence or the uncaring or deliberate acts on the part of them. And I'm going to show that, I'm going to speak to that at the appropriate time. Mr. Speaker, right? I never criticized the vaccination exercise. I asked for the government's protocol on the vaccinations. Who are going to be vaccinated first? What is the protocol related to that? The other suggestion I was making them on the vaccine was to give Bahamians options on the vaccine. The other recommendation or comments I made about the vaccine was to do some public education so that you could perhaps deflate what I call vaccination hesitation. That's what I was doing, Mr. Speaker. Right? And as an effort to show my support for vaccination, I went and did it. Now, he spoke about the proficient rollout of the vaccine. Mr. Speaker, they told me I called for my second vaccine. They sent me a reservation. They gave me a time to turn up. That's why I turned up. Not that they didn't tell me. Right? But
Honorable members.
I'm setting the record straight. Member said I was told not to come.
Honorable members.
No one told me not to come. I was
Honorable
given
member for Cat Island. Just a
Thank you,
moment.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member for Kalani, just one. Honorable members,
I got.
I would appreciate it if members, honorable member for Cat Island,
They tell me when it comes to you, I must walk on the different side of the road.
honorable member for Yamacraw. The chair is trying to make a point. I would appreciate it if members would respect the discretion of the chair with respect to the points of order being made. If the member was going off on a tangent on matters that were not raised, I would have stopped him. I don't need members trying to be officiators from their seat. Honorable member for Cat Island, are you finished? Thank you. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's unfortunate that there's a disconnect between the members, staff, and himself, because the committee would have informed the member's staff that he should not report to the center on a particular time because they would not have been ready for him. But in spite of that, the member showed up. So I accept that there was a disconnect. But you were so hurried, you were there with your arm. All right? So I accept there was a disconnect. All right? But Mr. Speaker, the member also attempts to blame us for mismanagement of the pandemic. The world is experiencing the same challenges, so maybe when the members speak, not only would he inform me how to resolve the problem, but he would inform the world at the same time. We all are listening. Mr. Speaker, the leader of opposition seems not to have any fixed star during this pandemic. And well, I know my fixed star. It is protecting Bahamian lives and helping those in need. Whereas the leader of opposition wants to criticize and even more criticize on behalf of my government, let me thank all the public health and private sector partners who have helped with the vaccination rollout. Let me say to them, Mr. Speaker, you have done a remarkable and extraordinary job. Let me say to them, Mr. Speaker, in a crisis, you have stepped up for your people. And I want to say to them again, Mr. Speaker, that they are all heroes. Mr. Speaker, global travel virtually ceased during the worst of the early phase of this pandemic. Borders closed, tourism paused indefinitely. Though we are nowhere near where we were pre-pandemic, things have improved and they will continue to improve. There's more air traffic and increased arrivals at PIA. We are seeing growth in visitor arrival. Hotels are open. We are getting Grand Bahama ready for recovery. Exuma is getting a new $65 million international airport, with Long Island and Eleuthera to follow. The cruise ships are soon to return, and I was elated driving into town, coming to work yesterday, and I saw a cruise ship in the harbor. The new cruise port is making progress. It will be one of the best such ports in our region. We are seeing more tourists on our beaches and our streets. And that was not the case several months ago. And therefore I send out a message to those straw vendors that they should get ready. Get vaccinated. As our recovery progresses, some specific companies and properties will make adjustments to their businesses to meet the ever-changing new norms. Some of these properties, Mr. Speaker, may be making changes long in the making before the pandemic, and some properties are adding new attractions and amenities. We will continue to give support to those out of work. And though we may have had challenges when we came in, we continue to move along two tracks. Mr. Speaker, during this entire pandemic, as we listen around the world, many people have been laid off or furloughed. We laid off not one individual. Public service. We always felt, Mr. Speaker, that it was best to keep an individual employed so that he and or she can maintain their pride, their dignity, and their respect, as opposed to increasing the lines at social services. Mr. Speaker, we issued out $32.5 million for food assistance to ensure that all of our people were well fed. We issued out $44 million to private sector businesses to ensure that staff employment was retained. And we issued out about $118 million, that's up to March, so all these figures would have increased, $118 million for unemployment assistance to ensure that our people got assistance. And as I've said, we do not have the power to print nor to borrow $303 billion. Then, Mr. Speaker, we continue to move along the track of advancing the Bahamas in spite of our challenges. The first challenge coming into office, when we were challenged with arrears of $397 million, but in spite of that, we were able to pay 296 of that 397 million. In spite of our challenges, we've moved with our special funds where we've assisted the private sector and individuals and over the hill community. We have assisted via the SBDC 49 individuals to the tune of $122,000 in grants, and those 49 individuals, Mr. Speaker, was able to have created 142 jobs, an increase a revenue stream of about $4.8 million. And, Mr. Speaker, in spite of the challenges we faced, we were able to, in 2016, the murder rate was 111, 2017, 122, and in 2020, we were able to bring that down to 73. We were able to bring down robbery, which in 2016 was 783. We were able to bring that down to 313. And, Mr. Speaker, we are moving our digital systems along. As you would note, that in spite of the challenges we face, we still continue to roll out passport offices in the various islands as we move along. We continue with our digital plan, digitizing many of the areas, including cabinet here in the Bahamas. So, Mr. Speaker, the country has begun the long journey to recovery. The U.S. is our major tourism market. It is one of the world's leaders in vaccination. We expect increased numbers of visitors to our islands as more Americans get vaccinated and their country returns to normal. And this will lead to more jobs. It will lead to increased working hours and will lead to more income for families. The pandemic has been devastating to tourism-dependent economies such as the Bahamas. However, our close proximity to the United States, our careful handling of the pandemic, and our dynamic tourism product have positioned the Bahamas to take advantage of the post-pandemic recovery more than many other jurisdictions. And Mr. Speaker, I wish to note a number of changes of the emergency orders on the recommendation of health officials because of concern for an increase in cases in Andros, an increase in cases in the Berry Islands and Cat Island. The daily curfew will now be from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. effective Thursday, the 20th of May, 2021. Health teams are headed to these islands for outbreak investigations, and vaccination teams will also be deployed to these islands. Any other additional measures will be announced depending on the findings of the investigation team. And these recommendations, Mr. Speaker, will be made in the coming week. Grand Bahamas daily curfew remains at 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. And as Grand Bahama appears to be turning the corner, we expect to make adjustments very soon. So Pine Ridge, very soon you'll be able to stay out longer. The daily curfew on New Providence remains 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. Mr. Speaker, cookouts will now be allowed but only drive-up or pick-up, and no alcohol is expected to be served. This applies to Abaco, excluding the surrounding keys, Eleuthera, including Harbor Island, Great and Little Exuma, New Providence, Rose Islands, and Paradise Island. And I wish to note again, Mr. Speaker, the new emergency orders for indoor dining and travel requirements for those who are fully vaccinated. Restaurants on islands previously prohibited from offering indoor dining may now offer indoor dining to patrons who have been fully vaccinated for COVID-19 in accordance with recently released Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Management Order. And this applies to New Providence and Abaco. Patrons, Mr. Speaker, must provide documentary proof of vaccination, and all patrons and employees must continue to adhere to COVID-19 protocols. Mr. Speaker, in accordance with the order, fully vaccinated individuals will not be required to take a PCR test for COVID-19 to travel from New Providence and Grand Bahama, and will not be required to take secondary testing on day 5 of inter-island travel when traveling from New Providence or Grand Bahama. And a fully vaccinated traveler, including citizens and residents, are not required to take PCR tests for COVID-19 to enter the Bahamas. In the case of international travel, a fully vaccinated traveler is defined as a person who has received the required number of doses of a COVID-19 vaccine and 2 weeks have elapsed since the person has completed the vaccine. Mr. Speaker, I must state at this point in time that the EU just last week has reopened its borders to fully vaccinated individuals and will make further announcements this week as to travel protocols, but they have also stated that each individual EU state may make the necessary adjustment depending on which part of the world individuals are coming from. But they are opening up for travel, Mr. Speaker. And I also want to state, Mr. Speaker, that the EU had stated that they will keep their emergency orders, though they use a different wording. They would keep their emergency orders in place in the event that they are needed because of the possibility of aberrant viruses, that they may be forced to lock down or modify travel regulations, and at the same time, they may have to modify restrictions in terms of their own environment. And here we are debating the same thing, Mr. Speaker. International travel health visas for fully vaccinated citizens and residents are $10. Domestic travel visas for fully vaccinated travelers are free of charge. The fine, Mr. Speaker, the fine for submitting falsified vaccination is $10,000 or 2 years imprisonment or both. Under the new order, the requirements are being removed for PCR testing for those traveling from Abaco, Eleuthera, and Exuma. And the PCR COVID-19 test requirement remains in place for those traveling from New Providence and Grand Bahama, except in the case of fully vaccinated travelers who are exempt from the test requirement. Pine Ridge, I can travel to your island now just showing my card. I don't need a test. I've had 22 of those tests already. To access the complete emergency powers COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. Speaker, Bahamians and residents may visit opm.bs.gov. And Mr. Speaker, my government has secured vaccines for the Bahamas. We continue to work day and night to secure more shots for those willing to be vaccinated. May I say to those who are vaccinated, please encourage your family, your friends, and neighbors, colleagues, etc., to do the same if they are not yet vaccinated. Do not harass them, do not condemn them. Instead, share your experience. Let them know about the process. Calm words of encouragement and first-hand knowledge may bring others to the vaccination centers, ensuring they are protected from the terrible virus. As we continue to battle through the difficult time, Mr. Speaker, I remind all Bahamians to continue to abide by the public guidelines. And since last March, when the pandemic began in our country, my government and I have worked day and night to save lives and to protect livelihoods. We will continue this effort with our fullest attention because the full well-being of Bahamian people is our leading priority and some obligation. How much I have? 2 minutes? Mr. Speaker, before I close, I only want to remind Bahamians, the Minister of Health has stated that a lot of the infections are now occurring in young population. It's essential that they must remember there's such a condition called the post-COVID syndrome, where individuals may recover, however, 3 months later or even before, and sometimes may last for months. We're not sure. It may go on for years. We're not sure yet, as this illness is fluid. But with the post-COVID syndrome, Mr. Speaker, a state of lethargy, severe tiredness, weakness, laziness, unable to work, lifelessness would come on, where individuals cannot perform at the workplace. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, individuals may also suffer memory loss and lapses. And it's noted in some magazines that this may be as high as 30% of individuals who have been affected. And therefore, Pine Ridge, though you and I may have had our differences, I love you and I respect you. Please go and get vaccinated. I do not want you to lose any of your memory. I want you to remember me thoroughly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable members, it has been moved